Hi, my name is Chris Parkhurst. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'm also the host of the Documentary Life podcast, a show that spans 140 episodes, has been downloaded in over 135 countries, and I've been producing for about 5 years. I decided to put each and every episode up here onto YouTube to sort of expand the audience, and as we say in the show, maybe inspire and inform some more doc filmmakers, hopefully like yourself. In the episodes, you may find some older, maybe outdated URLs, in particular any of the documentary filmmaking courses that we do offer online. If you have any questions about the URLs, simply look in the show notes on this page, here on this YouTube page, and that'll be able to take you where you need to go to. Other than that, I hope you enjoy the show, and it's great to have another listener to the Documentary Life. Have a great day. Microphone check, 1, 2. CC, hello and welcome. CC, hello and welcome.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
She sells seashells by the seashore. She sells seashells by the seashore. There we go, rolling.
The joy of working in this arena is you're constantly, literally I'm constantly inspired by the filmmakers that I work with. And that is such a fortunate position. I mean, that's what gets me out of bed every morning, isn't it? And then, by being so inspired by those filmmakers, all I want to do is sort of try and make the playing field as bountiful as possible for those folks and for those stories. And that's what we're constantly thinking about.
Hello and welcome to The Documentary Life, a show that sets out to inspire and inform you on how to best live and lead your own documentary life. I am your host, Chris G. Parkhurst, and this is episode number 97. And it is brought to you by Barong Films, proud creators of documentary film, the Documentary Life podcast, and the Documentary Academy, our industry-changing A to Z documentary filmmaking program that will transform you into the documentary filmmaker that you've always wanted to be. Find out more at thedocumentarylife.com/academy. In the doc community, there are some very well-known names of organizations and festivals that we're all pretty well aware of or are associated with in some way. IDA, or the International Documentary Association, is certainly one of them, and we had IDA's Simon Kilmurray on the show last year talking about the organization. Others that come to mind might be the Sundance Documentary Film Program or the Sundance Documentary Fund, or Center for Independent Documentary, CID, or Doc NYC, the annual Doc Film Festival held in New York City. That's actually coming up here next month. Now, often these festivals or organizations can seem a little intimidating or pie-in-the-sky hopes that only a select few of us can ever be associated with. In some cases, this may be true, like Sundance, for example. In other cases, organizations or festivals might actually be far more approachable than we fully realize. And this is certainly the case for Doc Society, or you might be more familiar with its previous name, BritDoc, an organization that is based out of both the UK and the US, and is well known for being supportive of and connecting doc filmmakers from around the world. Among a host of other programs, Doc Society is responsible for the likes of Good Pitch, a program that brings together doc filmmakers with foundations, NGOs, philanthropists, brands, and media around leading social and environmental issues in order to create coalitions and campaigns that are good for all partners, good for the films, good for society. Doc Society was also responsible for launching the Impact Film Guide and Toolkit, a free online resource created to help anyone working with film to make an impact on society. Doc Society has assisted on hundreds of well-known docs like Steve James's The Interrupters, the Academy Award-nominated Hell and Back Again, and this year's Shirkers. And I wanted to talk with Doc Society, and I wanted to bring them to you because I know that they do great things. But I also know that sometimes these bigger organizations can feel, like I said, nearly unapproachable. But I've had the sense that Doc Society isn't like that. And sure enough, when I reached out and had a conversation with one of the founders of Doc Society, Maxyne Franklin, I quickly came to realize not only how integral they are to the doc community, but also just how accessible they are to the community. And so, because of this, I'm very happy to bring today's episode to you. You're going to hear a lot about the power of documentary and a lot about the ways in which an organization like Doc Society can help you harness that power and get it out to the people and organizations that can help you not only with the making of your film, but then get your film out to the people who will most benefit from seeing your film afterwards. Thank you again for joining us here today on episode number 97. We are inching ever closer to that century mark here on TDL. It's exciting times indeed. We'll be right back with our conversation with Maxyne Franklin from Doc Society right after this. Lately, we here at the Documentary Life podcast have been really ramping up our free live webinar events. It's a great way to learn the aspects of doc filmmaking from the experts in the field, as well as engage directly with the expert in a live Q&A setting. We've already had some great sessions so far, and our one coming up on December 4th will be no different. A few short weeks ago, it was episode 94, we had on the show acclaimed doc filmmaker and author John Reese. John is the author of Think Outside the Box Office, a book that details his and others' experiences with independent film distribution, a subject that John has since become recognized as a veritable expert on. Not surprisingly, this was an episode that was pretty popular, speaking to a lot of the DIY sensibilities of you doc lifers. And so we've invited him to host a live webinar with us to further explore the subject of documentary distribution, to be followed by a live Q&A session in which you get to ask any and all of your pressing distro questions, of which I know that there are many. I get your emails and I see your posts in the TDL community Facebook group. There always seems to be a desire to break the code of distribution of our films. If you'd like to attend this live event, which happens on Tuesday, December 4th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the US, simply go to thedocumentarylife.com to sign up. I'll post a link up in the show notes for this episode, and you can also find links to it throughout the Documentary Life website. Attending and participating in the live event is free to all listeners of the program. You just need to make sure and sign up by, again, going to thedocumentarylife.com. This is going to be a great opportunity for you, Doc Lifer, to engage directly with a film distribution expert. So get your questions ready and sign up today. I have the pleasure of bringing Maxyne Franklin of formerly BritDoc, now Doc Society, onto the Documentary Life today. Maxyne, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Generally, what we do, Maxyne, at the outset when we bring on guests is we try to get some context for the conversation in terms of your background. I'd love to hear what your connection is to documentary film and when and where that might have began.
Good question. I think I came to it primarily. I started out my career working as a researcher on a music TV chart show and band booker, which was brilliant fun in your early 20s in London.
Yeah.
But it didn't make me feel that substantial in my core. And at the same time, I was working night shifts at a homeless centre as well in the UK, and kind of wanted to do something that I felt had sort of more value to the larger world that I lived in, and sort of, the problems that we constantly see around us. So I made a shift and sort of quit my job in music, and had to sort of take a steep learning curve into the world of documentary. So I did that via going and working in the documentary department at Channel 4 television.
So it was Channel 4 where you first started out.
Exactly. So that was my first sort of foray into sort of immersing myself into the documentary world in a professional capacity.
And what did you think of documentary at that time? I mean, were you getting into film, or were you very specific, I want this to be a documentary track?
I was very specific about wanting it to be documentary, and sort of actually at that time, sort of documentaries and Channel 4, particularly in the UK, were still pretty innovative. They were making really meaningful content. And I was genuinely sort of inspired by the stories that I was seeing on television. There was one that stood out for me about a homeless gentleman who had mental health issues. I think it was called The Life of Brian. It was part of the Cutting Edge strand on television. And that really resonated with me. And those were the sorts of films and those were the sorts of stories that I wanted to be sharing, with the wider UK. So that's definitely, I was definitely about the documentary.
And Maxyne, to give us maybe a better context or some understanding for our listeners who are not based out of the UK, and the UK is our second biggest base, the US being the first, but we're downloaded in over 140 countries at this point. Can you give us some idea what Channel 4 is about, or what it at least was about at that time, and where documentary fit into their scheme of things?
So back in the day, Channel 4, I think it launched in like 1981. And this is obviously pre-digital, when we didn't have that many broadcasters. And it was originally sort of a much more youth-oriented channel compared to the BBC and ITV. It was an alternative. Everything that it did was trying to be different and new and sort of lend voice to sort of voices that we weren't used to seeing on television.
Right.
And I think it continued to doing that. I'm not so convinced it does that anymore, although I don't live in the UK, so I don't watch it. But sort of by the time we were leaving, the part of the reason we left is because we felt the kinds of films that we wanted to be making and the kinds of films that Channel 4 wanted to be transmitting had sort of parted ways. But in its heyday, it was a bloody great place to be.
Absolutely. And we've had a few other guest filmmakers on the program who have, more recently had some of their shows on Channel 4. So getting a little bit more of that context and understanding of Channel 4 is very helpful. So Maxyne, not unlike our mutual friend Simon Kilmurray of IDA, you have a very impressive list of executive producer credits. How does one accumulate these executive producer credits? And I'm curious why there aren't other credits that are listed on something like your IMDb page. And I guess what I'm getting at here is, obviously you have experience in doc film. Why are those not listed as opposed to obviously these impressive executive producer credits?
I think the way that we've set up Doc Society is we made a collective decision, myself and my co-directors, Jess Search, Beadie Finzi, and now Sandra Whipham, that whilst we've always been directly funding films, we didn't want to make it a contractual obligation on the filmmaker to give us any form of credit apart from, the organisation or the company credit, which we do.
Right.
But we didn't make it a requirement that we had to have personal EP credits, and that's something that has stayed throughout our main journo fund. So basically, it's at the filmmaker's discretion if they want to give us an EP credit, and usually that's dependent on how much time we're spending in the edit suite with them, if I'm honest. So, the films where I'm listed as an EP is not just through helping fund them, but it's actually about spending quality time with the filmmakers, helping them evolve the narrative and the story, and spending time in the edit with them, helping them, towards distribution, towards their impact goals. It's a much larger body of work.
Yeah. And obviously we'll get into that with BritDoc and Doc Society because that all fits in there. It's actually helpful to hear that explanation of executive producer, because I think a lot of our initial idea and preconceptions of executive producer is, okay, that's who threw a bunch of money to the project. And it's actually, certainly in your guys' case, far more involved than that. And that being said, why don't we get right into it? So BritDoc is who I had been familiar with for quite some time, and you were one of the founding directors of BritDoc. Tell us who and what BritDoc was and who they were serving.
When we originally set up, as I sort of alluded to earlier, it was there was a sort of, myself and Jess were both working at Channel 4, and Beadie Finzi, who is our co-founder, was an independent filmmaker that we were working with. So, we were funding her projects and very proud to be showing them on Channel 4. And we ran a department called Independent Film and Video, which garnered amazing press reviews and fantastic awards, but very little viewership. Largely because we were at 11 p.m. at night, but still. So we sort of decided that, we did that thing whereby, you look at the landscape within which you're working, you look at the community with which, that you want to be serving, that you're trying to serve, and work out how those two things can sort of sit together in the best way for everybody. And it quickly became apparent to us that actually working inside the channel wasn't the best way for us to be serving independent feature, documentary filmmakers or first-time documentary filmmakers. And actually that we were looking sort of at our sort of cousins in the US and looking at people like Sundance, looking at Creative Capital, looking even at South by Southwest, and trying to work out sort of how they were modeling what they were doing and what we could be doing better in the UK. And so we sort of cherry-picked a bunch of those things and decided that it made more sense for us to start a foundation, which amazingly Channel 4 saw the value in and they were our only funder for the first 3 years.
Oh, wow. So this was very much supported by Channel 4 at the
Absolutely.
inception. Okay.
At its inception, we outsourced ourselves. So from being a department in the channel, we went outside of the channel, and actually we had total, independence in terms of our editorial judgments.
Wow, brilliant.
And the only thing that we had to do was that should Channel 4 want to show any of their films, they could do so for a nominal £1 fee. Wow. Because we'd already funded them anyway.
That's right.
Through the foundation. But it also meant that Channel 4 didn't have to show the films if they didn't want to. So we sort of, that's how we were trying to support the British documentary community. And also because we could see that, internationally, independent docs and feature docs were thriving, and that wasn't quite taking off in the UK in the same way. And we wanted to bring that into the UK. So very quickly we went from not just funding films, because it was obvious that we can only support a handful of filmmakers in that way, and we wanted to have a broader cultural shift. So we started a festival that was specifically for independent feature docs and called BritDoc, which we brought in commissioners from across the US and internationally more broadly, and filmmakers, so that we could actually try and sort of re-inspire the British community of amazing filmmakers to make work that had an international contribution.
You did mention first-time filmmakers. I'm curious who you had in mind, or what types of films that you had in mind that you wanted to help support.
To be honest with you, at that point it was our mandate when we set out, so those first 3 years, was specifically British filmmakers. So it was specifically around inspiring, because British filmmakers are amazing, and they have always had the fortune of being able to hone their craft through a very supportive UK television system. And actually, what we were trying to do was saying there is a world beyond our television system that your films can really sort of take the stage on as well. So we were just trying to inspire that level of ambition, I think, in British filmmakers, full stop, and just opening them up to, not many British filmmakers were going to Sundance at that point in time. This was sort of 14 years ago.
You mean there are British filmmakers outside of Mike Leigh?
I know, who knew, right?
Yeah, who knew exactly? But go ahead, please.
So we were just trying to sort of open some doors and sort of to bring that sort of ambition into our filmmakers.
Yeah.
And I would say, very quickly, we became much more global. And I would say that actually was always, in many ways, the way that we came to do BritDoc, which was, again, looking at sort of what the community needed and how we can best serve it, is we just sort of, very quickly started looking more broadly than our own shores. And once we'd done BritDoc for 3 years, Sheffield Doc Fest really stepped up its game and started being much more international in its focus, much around features and not just television. And so we realised that we no longer needed to do BritDoc, because actually it had already served its purpose in terms of upping everybody else's game. And so then we did the same thing that we've always done, which is look around us and go, actually, we'll say what would be useful for us to do next? What else does the community need? And that was, by that point, it was just in these shores and beyond, and how can we try and serve that? So I think that's always been our ethos.
And did that then sort of, I feel like that makes it's a natural progression at that point to, I don't know if it's, you guys would call it a name change or rebranding or what, but is that where is that how Doc Society happened then? This idea to make the reach broader than simply the UK?
I'd say actually sort of the first thing that we did that made the reach broader was a program that we run called The Good Pitch,
Of course.
which is sort of around bringing social justice filmmakers together with, partners that can use them to sort of change the dial on issues. And that's The Good Pitch, which has always been branded as The Good Pitch and not branded as BritDoc. So it never had that sort of, the British home idea.
No,
And
never. Yeah.
That has been global for many, many years. And we've been doing that in New York for 10, I think possibly 10 years, 9 or 10 years. And it now sort of has a complete life of its own. We've had editions in Indonesia, in South America, in Kenya. It goes everywhere now.
Well, and I think this is worthy of absolutely further exploration, because Good Pitch has been known in the doc community for quite some time now. It's a pretty big deal for independent doc makers. Tell us a little bit more. Let's dive a little bit deeper into Good Pitch, what that looks like, what the events are, who you're bringing together, in terms of networking and introducing with the doc filmmaker, and then how a doc filmmaker gets involved with Good Pitch.
Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose Good Pitch, is a riff on the traditional documentary forum, I would say. But sort of reduced it, so rather than having a filmmaker pitch their idea to sort of 50 commissioning editors that may or may not be interested in it, the process is dedicated to films that are specifically around social justice issues and that have tangible goals or ambitions of things that they can change. And then we curate a 8-person, think of it as like the perfect dinner table conversation around one specific issue area. So we curate a table of 8 people who are at the sort of pinnacle of working on that issue that might not naturally work together on an issue either, but that are all interested in sort of shifting the dial on a certain subject area that film speaks to. And we spend 6 months both working with the filmmaking team to really hone their outreach goals, and working with, calling out to everybody that's working on that issue area, making sure that we've got exactly the right people at the table, not just the right people at the table, but people that we've already been discussing the project with. We know that they're going to say positive things, even if they don't want to directly get involved with it. It's going to be a positive conversation. It's not going to be negative, and it's not just going to be a one-word no. There is going to be a positive, a lively conversation at the table around both the subject area and also broadly how film can work with agents for change. And then you've got, at the same time, you've got a room of 400 people where there are plenty of other people who are potentially also interested in your project. And, in the last few years alone, particularly in the US, I have to say, it's amazing how, the folks in the audience, not just the people at the table, but we have queues of folks lining up at the mic to talk to these filmmakers. It's like the filmmakers are the rock stars of the day. It's an amazing thing to see. And, you can have pledges of anything from money to pledges of networks to pledges of cinemas. We've had somebody pledge a truck because that was one of the needs of the campaign needs. So all sorts of things can be pledged at that table and then beyond. And, we have people coming over, giving us postcards, offering, 50,000 to projects, but they didn't want to say it at the table. And when you have that as a live event of all of that positivity, it becomes a snowball effect. So everybody gets really heightened, and it really sort of elevates the work. And then, that's just the beginning of it. And then, of course, we'll try and support the filmmaker to make sure that they can optimize on all of those gifts, all of those pledges, so that when the films come out, which is oftentimes still at least a year away, because films, building campaign partnerships takes time. So, and then you really see those things take into effect.
So, Maxyne, this sounds absolutely amazing and brilliant, but I need to have a better understanding of, so I have a film. How do I come to you with my film and say, this sounds great, can you help me pitch this? How do you How do I present my film to you, or how are you selecting the filmmakers to work with?
It's slightly, it shifts slightly for each event. As I said earlier, the Good Pitch program is completely global now. We work with partners across the world who come in and say, we'd like to bring Good Pitch to our territory, to our region. DocuBox in Kenya, various different organizations. And so those global entities will select local filmmakers. That's how they'll do their own piece. In the US, we do two different things. We have Good Pitch Local, which is, we've done events in Detroit, in Dallas, and we're doing an event in Philly in December 18. And that's a slightly sort of smaller event, but no less large in ambition.
And are the filmmakers local to those towns, or
the filmmakers? Exactly, the filmmakers are local to those towns. The film subjects are local to those states. And that was very much in response to the 2016 elections.
I'll bet.
Which was actually the community. Again, it was about what the community was asking for. Everybody was saying, actually, we need to go local. We need to be working much more closely with our local filmmakers and local change makers. So Good Pitch Local is in response to that. And then Good Pitch New York happens, and that's much more of a national event. So, the stories can be national, and the folks that attend are national. All of those things, though, are open application. So
is it a revolving application, or there must be deadlines? And I assume they're all up on the Doc Society website.
They are all on our website. Everything is just an online application. All of the deadlines are up there. I don't think there's anything live currently, but yeah, that's where we put everything. Most of our funds are through online application, and all of the Good Pitches are as well.
Okay, great. And we don't have to get super deep into Good Pitch. We could easily do a whole program on Good Pitch, but I will ask one more question just for clarification. So, for example, my wife and I have a film that we've been working on for 4 years called Elvis of Cambodia. It primarily takes place and deals with Cambodia. My wife's from the UK, I'm from the US. How do we know who to approach to if we wanted to apply for a Good Pitch?
I would say...
Good one, right?
I mean, without knowing very much about your project.
Yes, of course.
I would say if it was a film, it's irrespective in many ways where the two of you are from. It's more about where the film is set and where you think the change might happen. So if the film is set in Cambodia, but actually what you're looking at is there needs to be a shift through, I don't know, you want to get the UN into the room, then you would apply for the New York Good Pitch, because that's where we can bring the change makers. So I would say look at it much more around where your change makers are. Unless it's a local, which of course then it is specific to local filmmakers and local subjects.
Well, and our film in particular is actually, while while a lot of it takes place in Cambodia, it would be more relevant in some ways to the diaspora. So Cambodians around the world. So awesome. Okay, that's very helpful to understand that process, and thank you for going into in depth with Good Pitch. It is a very important element that's out there that doc filmmakers can be taking advantage of. So it's helpful to have a better understanding of that. So I have some exciting news to share with you, Doc Lifer. On Friday, November 23rd of this year, the documentary Life will be hitting a milestone. We'll be 2.5 years into this incredible journey and posting our 100th episode of the podcast. I know, it doesn't seem possible, but nonetheless, here we are at the century mark. Not surprisingly, this has given Steph and I pause to look back on the documentary Life, as well as to look to the future of our own documentary lives. It is because of this that we have decided that our 100th episode will complete the first season of the TDL podcast, and it will allow us to take a short hiatus and return next year to start season 2. Now, that does not mean that we won't be providing content for you, however. We're still going to be supporting your doc filmmaking goals, just on other platforms. We'll be building out our blog with the topics, tips, and know-how that you've been asking for and providing you with other valuable resources and insight. And very importantly, we'll be finishing our own documentary film, Elvis of Cambodia, and documenting the experience to share with you as we do. We want to invite you into the process of the making of our film. So we'll be sending you updates via the TDL weekly newsletter, the TDL blog, our social media platforms, as well as our YouTube channel. We want you to be experiencing firsthand the making of our documentary film. You'll have an opportunity to learn from our experiences, and we'd also love to hear any suggestions or encouragement you might have for us. If you'd like to be kept up to date, you should definitely subscribe to our weekly newsletter, which you can do by visiting the documentarylife.com website. It's going to take some getting used to not creating this show for you every week. You know how much I love doing it and connecting with you guys. But I assure you, we'll be back bigger and more badass than ever before. We can't wait for you to see what we'll have in store for you for season 2 of the show. And make sure that you're here for the season finale, episode 100. Steph and I will be talking all things the documentary life and giving you a look into what we have planned for the next several months. So until then, continue to enjoy season 1. Know that we have an incredible amount of gratitude for you, Doc Lifer, and we'll be talking with you soon. Let's talk about Doc Society now. Doc Society, or formerly BritDoc. How and when and why did the name change come about, Maxyne?
So we changed the name, I think about 2 years ago. And it's something that we'd been playing with the idea of changing for some time. As I said, we whilst our focus had been on British filmmakers for the first 3 years, I think probably from the moment we started working with Puma, that was always an international development fund back in the day.
With Puma Creative?
Yes,
Okay.
Exactly. So we've been working globally for a long, long time, but there's also that thing of we were still a young company, young foundation, and we had, slowly got brand recognition, and that's something that you don't want to let go of easily.
Oh man, no way. Yeah.
So, there was, I think, whilst we've been talking, BritDoc hadn't felt relevant to us internally for a long, long time.
Yeah, right.
There's been a lot of sort of pushback from people that we'd asked about changing our name, and everybody was like, no, but everybody loves you as BritDoc, everybody knows you as BritDoc. And I was like, sure, but it doesn't really speak to what we do anymore. But we were fine with that. And, as I say, there is an element of brand recognition. We were still a young company, so we had to make sure that we were sort of evolving. And then I think actually in many ways, internationally with the rise of nationalism, it just didn't feel appropriate to have a country name in our name anymore.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about what else Doc Society offers, because you guys offer filmmakers a lot. So I want to get to as much as we can. Let's talk about some of the various grants and funds that you guys currently offer.
Yeah, I would say right now, and this is something that also constantly changes, we have the Birth of Journalism Fund, which is specifically for films that have sort of journalism at their heart. So it's where the filmmaker is actually sort of, really unpicking something new. Then we have the BFI Film Fund. So we very recently took over the British national funding for documentaries, which we're doing in partnership with the BFI.
And that's the BFI Doc Society Fund, right? Okay.
Exactly, yes. And that one is specifically for British filmmakers.
Got it.
The Journalism Fund is open for completely, absolutely global filmmakers.
And that was the birth of Doc Society Journalism Fund.
Yes, okay. Exactly. And then we have, most recently, we've just launched a fund called New Perspectives, which is a development fund. And that's with our partners at the Perspective Foundation.
Okay. And that's for development, right?
Exactly. That's specifically for development. And I mean, development in documentary is pretty loose.
Yeah, right.
like
at almost any stage. Yeah.
And, we're obviously, we're long in the tooth enough to know that. But again, that's another one that, in an ideal world would be looking to support sort of, 50% global South filmmakers, and also specifically looking at sort of representation and sort of who's telling the story. And then we work with another foundation called Threshold, who we consult for. So present sort of a selection of films to them once a year, and then they sort of, fund directly, and we're just involved with the selection process. Yeah, I think those are the ones that are current. And as I say, we're constant, like filmmakers, we're constantly, out trying to fundraise for new opportunities to give to filmmakers.
Yeah, right.
So, I know exactly what it feels like to constantly feel like you're pitching. Um,
Yeah, right. Yes, you certainly do. If you're anything like me, you appreciate a good checklist. I've got all kinds of checklists in my life. Every night, I'm creating my to do list for the next day. Whenever we go camping, I have a camping checklist. Whenever I go out on a shoot, I have a checklist with all of the gear, shots, and B roll that I'll need. So one day, I thought to myself, why not some kind of checklist for doc filmmakers? And so I came up with one. It's called the Documentary Filmmakers Essential Checklist, and it's completely free to any doc filmmaker who wants to learn the essential aspects of making a documentary film in the modern day industry. I am all about empowering documentary filmmakers, and this course does just that. It is my sincere hope that this free course will help make your doc film's journey truly the exhilarating and rewarding experience that it can and should be. Enroll today for free by going to thedocumentarylife.com/courses. Now, Maxyne, one of the things that I would love to hear from you about, and it's something that listeners and other doc filmmakers like myself, I think are challenged by, or maybe we have this preconceived notion of, and I'll use IDA or Sundance as an example, these bigger organizations. Sometimes we are intimidated by the sheer sort of size or the prestige of an organization, and it might make us less hesitant to kind of reach out. And I know that I don't know this because anyone from IDA has said this, but I know this because other doc filmmakers have approached me with it, and my listeners have said this as well. They're less likely to reach out to an IDA because the thought is that, well, they're for West Coast or LA specific filmmakers, or they're this really big, ginormous organization. Why would they care about my film from, small town Indiana? So I'm curious if you feel like you're aware of that with Doc Society, and if so, what are you doing to make your organization approachable to really any filmmakers from around the world?
I would say yes, we are aware of it, and I would say that in many ways, the way that we're trying to do it is by working with partners. If you're looking at the global picture, we're trying to work with partners on the ground. And so, again, people like DocuBox, who sort of filmmakers can approach them, understand who we are, and then feel more comfortable approaching us. We've got a pretty good history of working with filmmakers from the global south. So I think we're sort of, we're managing that sort of carefully, I hope. In the US, I think Good Pitch Local has really helped with that, actually. And it really does change the dynamic, I think, when you go into somebody else's community as opposed to filmmakers from those regions, coming to New York and pitching at you. And it shifts the dynamic. And I've met some amazing filmmakers by doing Good Pitch Local and actually going out into the community, working with filmmakers for 2 or 3 days. And then I think also, festivals like Camden International Film Festival is another great place. Because of the way that they're set up, it's much less intimidating for filmmakers. It's, the way they pitch is in front of an audience of, local community members. It's not an industry audience quite so much. And I think that really helps for how filmmakers can approach, the panelists. And I think that's, another great place. And then on a slightly lighter note, I like that BritDoc and now Doc Society, we've always done, or whenever we can do an open house party at Sundance. So any filmmakers that are at Sundance, it's not guest list. We're very democratic. And
maybe it should be if anybody's on a guest list anywhere, then you're not invited.
Yeah, we're like the opposite of a guest list.
Yeah.
We make handmade invites. We don't even send out an email because what we don't want to do is like forget somebody and then go, oh no, it becomes hierarchical. And the way we do it is we make handwritten invites, take them out with us when we get to the ground on Sundance and just hand them out to folks. And that's to anybody. And it's sort of like, yeah, bring anybody you like, we don't care. It's completely open house. Whenever we host parties, it's normally us, it's all of, us, myself, my co-directors and all of our staff that are behind the bar serving. So it's like, this is what we're here for. We're here to serve you. And we understand that actually it can feel intimidating to have to approach us. But when you see us like pulling you a pint behind the bar, hopefully
Yeah.
we can break down some of that at least. So we try and make it as democratic as we can, by being, out on the road and trying to be non-hierarchical. But of course, totally understand that, even as I say that, that's saying, well, you've got to be at Sundance to go to the party
Yeah,
anyway,
of
and blah,
course.
blah, blah. So
That
not
did come to
fully
mind
aware.
pretty quickly. No, I
But
love it.
yeah.
I love it. That's fantastic. Now, there is a downloadable book on your website that, that I went through, and it really kind of goes much more into depth in a lot of what we've talked about here. And it's the book Impact of Art. Now, I'll put a direct link up to that in our show notes. But maybe you could help us understand a little bit more what's in that book, and maybe why, as doc filmmakers, we should go download that.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, I would say in some ways that the impact of art is probably a few years old. It was almost like a yearbook in terms of, these are the things that we're thinking about. These are the ways that we're trying to address issues that we're seeing in the field. But in some ways, it's probably even slightly out of date right now. I would say that the more useful things that we've currently got out in the world for filmmakers is the Impact Field Guide and the Safe and Secure website. So,
Right, of course. And in fact,
with,
we've talked about the Impact Field Guide earlier. I can't remember exactly when we did, but last year we were talking with an impact producer. And so we had a link to the Impact Field Guide up from our site.
perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think those sites are actually things that, again, we've made specifically for the community and with the community, and they are completely free resources. The Impact Field Guide has I think it's just been updated. We're just finishing updating it. It's available in Spanish. We're doing an Arabic version. But it's sort of, for folks that are looking at creating impact with their films, it's an amazing resource in terms of all of the things that you need to be thinking about and that you should be thinking about, different ways that you can look at, that you can look at change, whether it be top down or bottom up, and sort of like how your film can fit into that, and sort of brilliant case studies across a sort of broad spectrum of film over the last 5 years. And I think that actually is a way more useful resource than
Yep.
our book about ourselves.
Okay, great. No, that's totally fine. I know the Impact Field Guide, and it is a great resource. So we will link to that again.
Yeah, and I'd also just point people towards the Safe and Secure website as well, which is a more recent resource. But if you, as we all do, independent filmmakers are the ones that do tend to sort of like throw themselves out there onto the front line, whether they've got funding or not. And we as funders and as film partners have a responsibility to our filmmakers to make sure that they're safe in these, in these areas. And that doesn't necessarily just need to be a war zone in the Congo. It can be, in the US itself is becoming more and more dangerous. Protests, as we know, are becoming more and more dangerous. It's all the things that you need to be thinking about to make sure that you're at least going into these situations with your eyes wide open, and you're like setting yourself up for success rather than failure. And it's, risk analysis, it's digital security, and it's also, links out to a whole bunch of training resources. And so I would say that, anybody that's making, journalism is under threat right now. Anybody that's making out in the world, making films that are sort of around important subjects of our time, then I would definitely be directing them to the Safe and Secure website.
Amen, sister. And can you give us that direct URL?
It's safeandsecure.film.
Safeandsecure.film.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So go to safeandsecure.film.
Maxyne, this has been an enlightening conversation, very, very helpful. I'm so happy to be speaking with somebody formerly of BritDoc, now of Doc Society. What, if anything, have we missed in this conversation? Whether it's about Doc Society, whether it's about your own doc life, let us know. What have we missed? Anything?
In a different conversation, I'd be having a chat about sort of how we sort of collectively work together, both filmmakers, non-profits, equity partners, broadcasters, all of those things, like looking at the wider industry. But in many ways, I do feel like that's a conversation rather than a think piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
So but those are all the things that are currently on my mind, on our mind at Doc Society. And also sort of, again, looking at representation in filmmaking, both in the US and beyond. Yeah, I mean, the joy of working in this arena is you're constantly, literally, I'm constantly inspired by the filmmakers that I work with.
Yeah.
And
You
that
and me
is
both.
such a
It's so
fortunate
cool.
position.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what gets me out of bed every morning, isn't it? And then, by being so inspired by those filmmakers, all I want to do is sort of try and make the playing field as bountiful as possible for those folks and for those stories. And that's what we're constantly thinking about. So if you or any of your listeners have thoughts about how they'd like to see things shifting, then we'd love to hear that too.
So happy to hear that, Maxyne. It's wonderful to have a Maxyne Franklin and Doc Society out there in the community helping and working for us. Maxyne, thank you for agreeing to be on the program. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Chris.
Don't forget, if you're interested in a guide to help you navigate the fundamental aspects of doc filmmaking, the things that every doc filmmaker should know, then get our free doc filmmaking course, The Documentary Filmmaker's Essential Checklist, by going to thedocumentarylife.com/courses. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next episode. Thanks again for listening to the show, and remember to like and subscribe to this channel. Also, remember, for any of the URLs that may or may not be outdated and you want to get the most up-to-date information, perhaps for the documentary filmmaking courses, for the blog, for other episodes, just go ahead and check in the show notes below on this YouTube page, and that'll give you the correct URLs to use. Thanks again. Have a great day.